All right, looks like we're ready. Hello to the quick early people joining. Okay, let's do it. Comes on 3, 2, 1. It is Locked On Jazz for the 12th of November. The madness has started. Westbrook wants out of Houston. Chris Paul could be on his way to Phoenix. Who else is being moved? We'll continue to look at the NBA draft prospects via the numbers. Who's the best pick and roll players in the draft? And it's a live edition with your questions about trades, draft picks, possibilities, and the measurables are out. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow! How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan as we move toward the NBA draft and the excitement that is the NBA draft. We are live today, coming to you on Locked On Live on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube, Locked On Sports on Periscope and Twitter, as well as Facebook. Thank you so much for jumping aboard and joining the program and being a part of the live audience. Get your questions in, say hello. Excited to have you on board and really excited to take your questions. I want to get through a few things right out of the chute like we usually do and then get to your questions on today's show. Thanks to everyone on Instagram as well at DLock09. All right, the madness has started. Westbrook wants out of Houston. Honestly, from just a Jazz standpoint, I cannot see anything there working. Okay, I can go to Trade Machine. You can do Mike Conley and Ed Davis. People on our group our fans are more down on Mike Conley than he should be, but it's a $30 million contract and when he opts in. And so you could do that trade. But honestly, that's a 3-year contract you're taking in on Russell Westbrook, on needs that are heading the wrong direction, on a player that's inefficient and hasn't shown the ability to help teams to win. I'm passing on that. And I don't think the idea that Gordon Monson, I was on the afternoon show, and Gordon Monson made the comment, well, what about Quinn working his magic? I don't think Russell Westbrook is a particular style of play is particularly coachable in the sense that once you're into the half court, he can't shoot. He and Rudy both can't shoot. So now you have 2 non-shooters on the floor. You're back at the same problem the Rockets had with Capella and Westbrook. And then in addition to that, if you go suddenly Oklahoma City all of a sudden ran a bunch of really creative, good stuff under Billy Donovan last year that they just didn't before. And I don't think that's coincidental that Russell Westbrook left and then that happened. So there's my quick take on that. I kind of feel the same way with Chris Paul, frankly. Chris Paul, for those, I haven't heard a lot of people interested, but why not the Jazz? 2 years, massive contract, totally dominates the ball, and is going to be on the wrong side of the numbers at some point here. So, I just don't see, hey, I get it. Every single time somebody comes up with a name, you start playing the trade game and looking at it. It's fun. That's what the whole offseason's about. But in these cases, I don't think it's particularly relevant. I don't see a lot of major moves here. And there is an argument to continuity on this basketball team and how you might be able to keep this group, which is a great group of guys, which has shown it can be good. And frankly is like, a George Hill-led boycott by Milwaukee away from beating Denver in that first round. I don't want to use it as an excuse, and there's definitely things they could have done better, and I'm sure they've been kicking themselves about it the whole time. But the fact of the matter is, this team was up 3-1 against a really good Denver team. There's a pretty good argument anywhere in the West that this was the second, third, fourth best team in the West. You don't need to do anything dramatic. You're certainly always looking to get better, and the Warriors are going to be better. And this is the time of year in which you do get better. Hey, Joe Ingles just stopped by to tell me to stop yelling. I'm excited, Joe. It's fun times. And then said goodbye. So maybe Joe has left. Yeah, I probably should stop yelling, just be talking. But anyway, so I think that's what imagine what it's going to be like in an empty arena, Joe. But thanks for stopping by, Joe. We appreciate it. So Joe Ingles stopped by for a second. Glad I didn't just say we should trade Joe Ingles for Russell Westbrook. That would have been awkward. I didn't think so. Just getting a note here that Shams has just tweeted that the Hornets are a suitor for Westbrook. That actually makes perfect sense, right? There's a franchise that doesn't have a single piece of their puzzle. Frankly, their best players are Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham. Like, that's not going to get it done. And so, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense for Russell Westbrook to go to someplace like Charlotte. Charlotte Hornets have cap room. They can take him in. They're not going to be able to sign a major free agent. They become relevant for the first time with a player of that caliber. So it totally makes sense. All right, let's take a look at our categories and then start taking your questions. For those who did not hear yesterday, each day I'm looking at the best in category in our draft. The measurables came out yesterday. Some of them are pretty interesting and worth discussing as well. But so the best in category in the draft, yesterday we looked at athleticism, and today we're looking at playmaking, which is really quite simply just looking at pick and roll play across the board more than anything else. So who are the best pick and roll players in this draft? And, you know, we don't have the numbers on Killian Hayes. We don't have the numbers on LaMelo Ball. We don't have numbers on Danny Avila. So some of this is certainly, you know, a little limited in how much we can truly analyze each of these players. But from the data that we have, we can take a look at it. NBA, by the way, to their credit, it's hard to find and navigate, which is always the problem on that Mammoth site. They have some really good breakdowns on players on their advanced stats section. So if you're looking to look about a player, they have some interesting. All right, here are the best pick and roll players in the draft. Grant Riller comes out number one. He's a senior guard out of Charlotte. He's 23 years old. He's in the 97th in pick and roll percentile, 185 attempts. He's interesting to me because everything says no. He's 23, playing in a lesser conference. Like, everything says no. Except for you start to dig into Grant Ziller as a sophomore when his age would have been most appropriate. And he was in the 86th percentile of pick and roll. So he'd actually be the sixth best pick and roll player in this draft at that age. He actually peaks out on a bunch of the measurement numbers that came out yesterday on players and looked really, really good in those numbers. So that's pretty interesting to me. He defies a little bit of what you'd want because he's 23 years old and 6'3". But and I'm not sure what he does for teammates, but it's it would be interesting to see. It will be interesting to see. Malachi Flynn comes out as the second best pick and roll player in the draft on 215 attempts, which is a mammoth amount. He really peaks out numbers. Again, though, 22 years old and only 6'1", so that is a little bit of a concern. Patrick Williams has 26 pick and roll attempts, comes out well. Peyton Pritchard, the 22-year-old, again, we see this yesterday as well in the isolation numbers. The older players all look better. It's such a mammoth advantage, and it's why everyone wants to say, "Oh, you can't discredit a guy for being at college for 4 years," but you really can. And it's not that you're mad at them for going to college for 4 years. It's just that being 22 playing 18 and 19-year-olds is the same as being a senior playing JV, or being the same as being an eighth grader playing elementary school. And so, that really ends up being a big advantage. 21-year-old Sadiq Bey is next at 88%. This is where you actually get to 20-year-old Grant Ziller as a sophomore at Charleston. Then Tyrese Maxey comes out 86 percentile. This is really interesting because Tyrese Maxey to me is a player I'm having a hard time with at 6'3", 200, mammoth body, awesome physical component. I watched Kentucky, Mississippi State last night because I was trying to watch more of Robert Woodard to see what he was about. But the difficulty in that in Maxey is he's not really a shooter. His game is this kind of mid-range floater game. It's actually pretty good, but he ran 97 pick and rolls, so that was pretty solid this last year. But I'm not certain that I think I have a hard time a little bit with him translating. But give him credit. Here's a really interesting player, and becoming a more interesting player to me as the draft goes on. And he's also out of Kentucky. He ran only 34 pick and rolls. His name is Emmanuel Quigley. He came out very good on the measurements. He was our 100th percentile player in isolation attempts. He's 80th percentile in transition. He's 99th percentile in jumper off the dribble. When we do that category, he'll be the best on 32 attempts. His catch and shoot stuff is in the 84th percentile spot and shoot, catch and shoot in the 62nd. Everyone thinks Tyrese Maxey is the underused Kentucky player. I actually think it might be Emmanuel Quickly. I watched he and Robert Woodard guard each other in the Mississippi State-Kentucky game, and honestly, there was almost no real takeaway from that, in the sense that they're just honestly, like, neither of them did anything. Robert Woodard's defense was terrible in that game, if I'm being totally honest. Quickly has a nice one-dribble step back. It's probably why he's the best off-the-dribble shooter in the league. That certainly will translate to the NBA. He's got a great ball fake on a three closeout to a step back into a three. So I actually thought he looked pretty good. His defense switching on players looked pretty good. Emmanuel Quickly is kind of moving up my boards from a late second round or maybe late first. I'm not sure that that's the Jazz answer at 6'3", but his measurements made him a +5 reach, so I think he's actually truly a shooting guard and might be able to be in that ilk. I mean, are we talking like a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, an Avery Bradley if he can defend? Bradley's only 6'1", kind of entry in there. Some other players that are pretty good on pick and roll. Isaiah Joe out of Arkansas, he ended up getting a knee injury last year, only 47 attempts. Desmond Bane shows up again at 91. Devin Dotson, I watched a little bit of Kansas last night against TCU because I was interested in Bane and I was interested in Azubuike, who peaked out on the charts. Dotson, 85th percentile, 160 pick and rolls, which is the second most of anyone, pure point guard. Tayshaun Alexander out of Creighton, Cassius Winston, a guard, 22-year-old guard. Tayshaun Alexander, 22. Devin Dotson, 21. Desmond Bane, 21. Isaiah Joe, 21. Emmanuel Quickly, 21. I mean, Tyrese Maxey's 19 here is actually being 19 years old is probably the most impressive. And the only other youngster that's any good in here is Tyrell Terry, 153 chances out of Stanford. So that is your point guard setup. We'll get to your questions next on the draft, on the trades. We'll do another live show probably Tuesday or Wednesday before the draft next week. I just haven't quite figured out my schedule on that. And then we'll probably do a live show Thursday after the draft as well. We'll do a live draft show for you with Chad Ford and I. We'll be live on that. All right, let's get to your questions, your comments, all that. Today's show is brought to you by Intercap Lending. Intercap Lending came to Utah in April of 2016. I've been the benefactor twice, using Steve Carter twice on my refinances. He just did one for me recently. I am an absolute mess of getting things together and organized, and Steve's been amazing to me in making sure that I always have my stuff organized, taken care of. They're hyper responsive. They embrace change. The borrower experience is amazing. My partner in the Locked On Podcast Network is actually using Intercap Lending right now. They've stretched it out into California, Nevada, and some other places, and a bunch of people are using Intercap. I can't suggest it enough. Get it done before the end of the year. Take advantage of the great rates that are out there. If might have some changes coming up here with our government, so therefore you might want to jump on it. 385-800-8528 is Steve's number. 385-800-8528. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. That's intercaplending.com. Call Steve Carter. Make sure you tell him we've Locked On Jazz. You'll get the corporate rate. 385-800-8528. Mock draft. Locked On NBA mock draft. The best thing we do all year on the NBA channel is out. Days 1 through 6, day 2, 7 through 12. It's incredible. On our staff, Brad Rowland, Josh Lloyd, and Brandon Clean are amazing draft experts. Chad Ford stops by every 3 picks. John Hollinger breaks down every trade that we have. And Jeremy Wu of Sports Illustrated breaks down every player. Massive production, totally amazing. Make sure you grab it and tune in and to see it along the way. It is the Locked On NBA mock draft. So make sure you grab it. All right, let's get to your comments, your questions on Periscope, on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube, on everything, on Instagram. All right, let's go to Eric Wood. His first question comes in. What are your thoughts on Sam Merrill's a second-round pick? Seemed to be overly athletic. He has the size, shot-making ability, composure to help off the bench. I think the question on Sam Merrill, and I haven't watched him probably nearly as much as most of you, is ability to get the shot off. I mean, obviously there's the famous shot that he makes that, moreover, the quick release three. Is he big enough? He's not as big as a Duncan Robinson or a Davis Bertans. Can he just get that shot off? Can he become a high-volume three-point shooter in limited time? being out on the floor. I think, to me, that's probably the biggest question on Sam Darnold. It's not his ability to shoot. It's not his game. He matches a lot of what we're seeing in this draft from the fact that what you have is you have really good shooters or really good bodies at 6'5". It'd be great if he's 6'7". I actually think he could be like the next Duncan Robinson like this. I would say this about him, like if we're going to be consistent, he's 24, right? So, I mean, he's like a college kid beating up on 8th graders in college. So I think you have to be a little careful on that. Let's go to the next question coming in. From Sam on Periscope or Twitter. Hey, David, curious what if governors will vote on the Jazz sale sometime before the end of the year. And they get pretty far down the road on this without, there's no chance it's like they're not going to vote on it. Like they don't get that far down the road to enact and do all those things without kind of knowing that it's going to work. Let's see. Assuming everyone on Houston is available besides their 2 main guys, well, Westbrook's available. Gustavo Cano is the question. He might have, he's in a time change difference. I don't remember where he joins us from, but he might not have known. Westbrook is asked to be traded, and there are actually stories that the Hornets are the lead team. The Hornets also might be being played right now, trying to create one suitor so you create another suitor. So we'll see, but Charlotte is interesting. I think the interesting players, if they're really cutting costs, now they may have just cut costs to get in the tax with Russell Westbrook. And frankly, Westbrook is such a negative impact on your team offensively, such a high impact on your team playing hard, that I actually don't know if they'll have gotten worse. And so I don't know that actually like the sign of trading Russell Westbrook would be the sign that you're disbanding the team and not trying anymore. I actually don't go there. The same way I don't go there with Oklahoma City. If they trade Chris Paul, they're just opening the door to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They certainly lost an important piece, but I don't actually think it's a total rebuild. Yesterday on the show, I started getting to, probably means they don't need Danilo Gallinari anymore. I might not be right on that. We'll see. But Robert Covington, to me, would be super interesting. I do think Robert Covington, I've always felt Robert Covington is a slightly overrated player in that people like the concept of him a little bit more than what he actually is. But honestly, the reason is because he'd be such a perfect player for us. You suddenly play him at the 4, Boyan drops to the 3. If you're playing Joe at the 2 some of the time, you're mammothly big again. Like, this is the one thing I keep looking at with the Jazz I think super interesting is the idea, can we get someone who could play some 4, Boyan slides to 3. We're not great defensively, but keep him with Rudy, as coaches did last year. And then you can play Royce or Joe at the 2, Donovan or Mike at the 1, and you've gotten really big. And you've gotten really deep, frankly. And so to me, that kind of gets interesting in that. Paul Evans, thank you for the nice compliment. I appreciate it. Calling me the best podcaster in the NBA ecosystem. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I do appreciate that. All right, let's go. How far back does your college percentile data go? Would be interested to see Howard. Howard whom? From Twitch. You're probably talking the kid at this year you're asking maybe. The kid out of Marquette. Is that what you're the scorer out of Marquette? He's really little, if that's what you're talking about. He's really, really little. And so I don't necessarily see and he also played where he was the only one touching the ball on his team. So it seems to me to be hard to address. At what point in the second round usually are picks available for money? Less and less, actually. This is a great question from Spencer Ward. Less and less if you go back over the years. As the cap's gone up, as having a high-quality, low-salary player has increased, as basketball's gotten better, like we're the number 1 sport in the world right now, really, of developing talent where the best athletes are playing, less and less are you able to buy a second-round pick. It would be interesting to me if the Jazz could go get a second-round pick. Like, Azubuike just peaked out on all the athletic charts yesterday. I'm watching him. I don't love it. Like, he seems – it's crazy because he actually seems the opposite of the – so Azubuike is the center at Kansas. He came out with an unbelievable reach. He came out with an unbelievable vertical jump. But yet, I think there's a coil factor. The vertical jump can be really misleading because, to me, watching him against TCU last night, every time he gets it, he has to go down with his and collect, and then he's getting absolutely suffocated with the basketball, particularly early in that game. And you don't see him like rolling on the pick and roll, which, quite frankly, rolling on the pick and roll in the college game is just impossible. There's too many bodies around it. So bad, hard to watch. And so I think when you're kind of looking at all of those aspects to him, it is a little complicated in trying to figure it out. But I mean, he came out, he's 6'10" with a 7'7" wingspan. Like, that's pretty amazing. By the way, Robert Woodard, if you've been listening to our show over the last few weeks, the guy I like so much, and I don't love, I'm putting my flag on the ground on him, but let's be really honest. I watched him against Kentucky. He was pretty awful defensively and lacked some effort. He just is such an incredible athlete that at 23, I actually tweeted about Oxum's razor today. Like, he has the easiest route to NBA success because God went into his bag of tricks and just gave him all of his tools. He's just that unbelievable. But back to Azubuike, 6'10" with a 7'7" wingspan. And then he also peaked out on the vertical jump numbers. It's interesting because I don't actually see that. Standing vertical jump, he had a 37. And on the max vertical jump, Azubuike had a 41. So, those are amazing numbers for a guy that size. So if the Jazz don't have a second round pick, but if someone early in the second round was willing to let you buy up, I'd go grab Azubuike, see if he can turn into a backup center. We'd have to do something with our two other backup centers, maybe three, depending how you look at Juwan Morgan. And that's, and you'd have to figure that out. That's too many players at that position. But it's worth a second pick. The problem is, I don't think you can get that pick, Spencer. I think that's why your question's so good. Having a low salary second round draft pick right now is so valuable in this league that I think you really, really have a hard time getting that. All right, let me see on Instagram. I have not touched Instagram yet. With the COVID creating missed games and limited exposure for scouts, is there a bigger probability that good player drops to 23 with less scouting? I don't think so. These guys have been watching film and seeing these players probably more than any draft group ever in the history of the game because of the fact that we've had the COVID break and they've seen everything. So I think that's certainly, I love it. I don't think so. There's not a lot of mystery. You've watched you still have 20 games of film on every single one of these guys. From Stacy Romney, do you think Ryan Smith will be more involved in the Jazz draft than the Millers? $1.6 billion, man. He can do whatever he wants. That's my take on this question. I don't know. There's no way for me to know. The Millers were involved. They weren't not involved. So I don't know whether or not, but $1.6 billion, he can do whatever he wants. T-Man on Instagram says, move back in the draft and get rid of Davis's contract that we can use the full mid-level without tax territory. So value that. I also have to look at what happens if we stretch Ed Davis's contract. I don't think it matters, but that would be another possibility. But yeah, Ed Davis, whatever. Ed Davis is such a weird thing last year. And this happens. It's like he just aged overnight. He lost his bounce. He lost his he's never been a good pick and roll player. We looked at the Dame Lillard numbers. We knew that, but he was a great offensive rebounder. He had a bounce. He's just kind of lost it. Like he just didn't seem to have his body together last year. Now, did it just age? That's what happens. It's the trick of this game. And it happens fast. We don't realize how many players just disappear from the league in a year. There's also a chance that there was something just funky last year, and he'll be back and a little bit better. It'll be interesting to watch. But I do think there's a chance you'll see the Jazz kind of move him possibly at some point just to clear that cap space along the way. But what are you willing to give up? Just a second. Seconds are valuable. I just talked about how it's hard to go get them. What would the price be to move Ed Davis into cap space for the Jazz to have more flexibility with Jordan Clarkson and the exception? OKC has trade exceptions. Detroit and Charlotte are willing to absorb. Yeah, I think it's probably a second-round pick. At this point, you're not willing to give up more than that. So I wouldn't suspect that you're that you would do that. Instead, I think that you're and you have to find that. So the rule is you can buy a second-round draft pick for $3 million. Okay. We don't have a second-round pick this year. you're trading next year's second-round pick with Ed Davis, what you're really doing is selling your pick for $5 million. Pretty good deal, right? Now, is somebody else willing to buy a second-round pick for $5 million? Be interesting. T-Man came back. He's a Kentucky grad. Probably talking about Quigley. Much improved defense, fights out, overshooter, not a lead guard, but could be a secondary playmaker, handles it very well. Yeah, I like Quigley. I thought I might need to watch him a little bit more. He looked better to me. Staying on Instagram for a second, what do you think of Terrell Terry? From a Jazz standpoint, I don't think we need another point guard. I keep seeing these mock drafts taking a point guard. We have a primary ball handler. His name's Donovan Mitchell. We have a secondary ball handler. His name is Joe Ingles. And we have another primary ball handler. His name is Mike Conley. So I don't really see us needing a point guard. But Terry is playing a ton of pick and roll. He's a very good shooter. He's got a decent body. He's a little frail, but he's got a decent size and length to him. I don't think he'll be on the board for the Jazz at 23 anyway. If they took him at 23, it's a question of what route he has to the floor. To me, that's the thing on all these guys is what is their route to the floor? And the way I feel on a lot of these Jazz players is both, or these draft prospects, is both as a point guard and a center. I don't see a route to the floor for us. And now, hey, if you know you're drafting a guy at 23 and you know you're going to get 14 minutes a night out of him and you're certain of that, and it's going to be a good 14 and maybe he can play a little with Donovan so you get 20, then frankly, if you can get 20 minutes a night on the 23rd pick of the draft, that's not bad. But to me, it's a little bit, I don't know, I kind of would like to draft at 23 hoping, I'm taking my pick is like, and if I get him in our Locked On Podcast Network mock draft, I'm going to take Robert Woodard. He's 6'7". He's got a 7 whatever reach I just talked about. Like he came out unbelievable on the measurables again. I mean, you can just see it when he's on the floor because he's just now he can get his shot off anytime he wants on a one dribble jab step because he's that powerful. And does it go in? No, not really. His shot looks okay. His free throw shooting is poor. His numbers are not good. But to me, like he's got a 7'2" wingspan at 6'6". He can play the 2, 3, or 4. We just got to get some skills to him. I think he might be able to handle better. He plays comfortably with the ball in his hands. I think he has an offensive feel. He makes nice passes. His defense was just atrocious against Kentucky. Lazy closeouts, weak rebounding, just not good. So he's not perfect in any way, but to me, he has like multiple routes to the floor and only like a limited skill or two that he has to add to go with this unbelievable athleticism, and he's not outmatched at any point any night. Sam Merrill we talked about earlier, probably not a good example, but he's outmatched physically in a lot of ways on this thing. So I think that's important. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar in the market. All sorts of fun flavors out right now as well. And if you go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON, you get 20% off. If you've not had the best tasting protein bar out there with 100% real chocolate yet, you should. And if you want to try the new maple pecan, available still right now. Check it out. The pumpkin chocolate chip, I'm checking to see if it is still available. It is still available, the pumpkin chocolate chip. Available for the season, chocolate chip cookie. Mint brownie was a big win on the draft. Caramel brownie, we were pounding our Built Bars during the draft the other night. Coconut almond, someone says tastes like just like an Almond Joy, and there's peanut butter brownie as well. The macros are amazing compared to the leading men's bar. Built Bar has 120 fewer calories, 3.5 grams of fewer fat grams, 34 fewer net carbs, 17 grams of less sugar, and then 7 grams of more protein. BuiltBar.com, promo code locked on, 20% off. Let's go back to the questions. Andy is always a loyal, locked on listener. Thank you very much. Only trade that hasn't piqued my interest was Gobert and Niang for Jaylen Brown, Daniel Tice, and a first. Question is, would Tice and Bradley be enough at center? Would Brown, Bogey, and Donovan? Doesn't matter. We talked about this last time. I felt like we did the show last Thursday. I came back and was like, have we forgotten how great Rudy is, right? Like, let's make sure, on points gained, Rudy's the 5th most impactful offensive player in the NBA. Our offense with Rudy on the floor with a stretch 4 has always been 75th percentile or better, no matter who the stretch floor is, whether it's Thabo Sefolosha, Jonas Jerebko, Jay Crowder, Bojan Bogdanovic. If it's not Derek Favors, our offense has been in the 70th percentile or better with Rudy Gobert on the floor, and he's the best defensive player in the world. Like, they're just I just am not buying any of this. Sure, if he says he needs the Supermax, we're into a little bit of a buying there. But I just, Jaylen Brown might be great, and maybe you can find another center. But you're not going to find another center that just does the things Rudy does. And I actually do buy the narrative in the NBA that the center position is changing. But what I buy is that the mediocre or average center has lost value, but that the great center is actually more valuable. So, and the unique center that does something nobody else does is actually more valuable. So I don't know. I don't know that that's. I just can't buy that there's a lot of trades with Gobert that make us better. I guess that's my point. I just have a really, really hard time with that. Jaylen Brown. If we get in a box and we have to do it, Jaylen Brown would be a piece that would be like, okay, like that's a massive piece to the puzzle. Now let's go find a center who can just cover defensively and maybe enough offensively. What are the chances that we are overstating how good Donovan is because of the bubble? I doubt it. I mean, maybe that was a little bit unique shooting environment, things like that. But that was also somewhat of a natural progression as well. Spencer Ward is on fire. He's got like a million questions. Asked about Paul Reed, the DePaul second-round draft pick. I don't see it, to be perfectly. Great question here for CT. And how is Boyan's wrist, and is he going to be 100% early by the early start date? I would think so, because the whole point originally was to get him ready for next year, but I don't know that for a fact. I do know that he's in town. Last I heard, I had heard that he was in town. I think Andy Larson saw a sock game, but I also had heard some other aspects that let me know he was in town. So I don't, but I don't know what his availability is at this point. Zach Bogdan, thoughts on Rj Hampton? Interesting player, wing, long, athletic. I think out of the Dallas area. Went to New Zealand, didn't have a very good year there. His stock has slid a little bit. There might be a chance on both Rj Hampton and Cole Anthony that they're sliding further than they should. Cole Anthony played on a terrible basketball team last year at North Carolina. Now, Cole Anthony is a year too old for his position. Like, he was a 19-year-old freshman, and so he was as a senior, he was actually a year too old. As a sophomore, they held him back in his year. I get nervous on players like that. There's a really high bust factor on players that have that phenomenon where the parents held them back to make them better players. If you actually go back and look, Shabazz Muhammad's probably the best example of that. But I think there's a feeling that maybe both Rj Hampton and Cole Anthony are sliding a little bit. Let's go to James McMurray. How far does the college player data you have using would be interesting to see what it would look like in hindsight about Hayward, Allman, Burke, Hood, etc. You know what? I said to someone the other day, I should have used the quarantine to go back and do all this data, and I didn't. And so I would have to say that I don't have that. It might be, I think it's available, and so I could probably go back in a few years and do the top, knowing what the top 30 picks are. It's a worthwhile project. It might be, if I had as an assistant, it would be a better project. But it's a good one. All right, someone's asking about Rudy and the playoffs. There is a narrative that Rudy had a bad playoff. He averaged 17 points, 11 rebounds, shot 65% from the field, took 11 shots a game. He got a lot of shots. I don't have his point game. The question was I'm point game are fabulous. The only thing was probably he shot free throws terribly. He also went to the line six times a game. Yeah, Rudy didn't have a bad playoff. I keep kind of hearing that narrative out there. I don't know where that narrative is from. I think the second half, Rudy that completely dominated that comeback would have been nice if that was in the first half a little bit as well. But I think everyone has that a little bit. We had a lot of guys that didn't play that first half. His block percentage was down. That's because Denver never went to the basket. And Jokic just stopped trying to go to the basket the entire series. Jamal Murray was a problem. And, how you're going to deal – the league is is brilliant. And the answer to Rudy dropping and protecting the rim and not letting Jokic get to the basket and have any type of post-up was Jamal Murray playing off the bounce. And that, I think, that's going to be something that the Jazz have to figure out how they're going to deal with that with Rudy. Rudy did not, I don't think Rudy was probably particularly happy about Game 5 and Game 6. But, I mean, he went 17-7, 19-7, 24-14, 17-11, 11-12, 11-12, and 19-18 as his numbers for the series. I'm not sure I buy on these narratives. I don't actually know where I think they come from people who don't watch us. All right, any final questions I need to get to? Let me just quickly check the top of our Instagram feed. Thank you for everybody who jumped aboard today. Tanner Beckstrom, thank you very much. I had a Beckstrom who I coached in junior jazz, and I always wonder, can you talk about a Mike Conley for Tobias Harris trade? Who would say no? I think we would say no because of the length of Tobias Harris's contract. It's got another 4 years on it, a max number. It's pretty outrageous. I could see Philadelphia being interested in doing that deal. It would actually be good for them to have a point guard along with Ben Simmons. But I think we would say no to that because of the length of that contract. Should the Jazz take a shot on Cole Anthony? I just said I think he's getting overvalued the wrong way. I think there's a little bit of things that you got to check on with Cole Anthony as well. So I'm not entirely sure all the aspects of him. The one thing I would watch if I was going to watch Cole Anthony games, I'm going to go watch early in the season. I talked to some people who think that his ankle never really healed, so that the games late in the year, he doesn't look as good because of the fact that he came back from the ankle injury and was not as solid in that regard. All right. Any other questions on the Instagram? Somebody said, I only love Joe Ingles now. Okay. We can all love Joe Ingles. I have not looked at Jordan Nomura. I do not know that player. We should play 5 centers. Yeah, that'd be pretty funny. I mentioned Occam's razor. Somebody asked what it is. It means the lowest amount of variables to success. That's the way I often think of draft prospects too. So, if I'm looking at Kira Lewis Jr., Alabama, to me is kind of the Occam razor's pick. He's a 6'3" point guard coming downhill and pick and roll. You know exactly what he is, exactly what you're getting. There's not a lot of different routes to his success. He's either good enough at that or he's not. And you make that decision. It's a little bit how I feel on Robert Woodard. He's just such an incredible athlete. He won't have to overcome an athletic deficiency in any way, shape, or form. And so therefore, if you can teach him some skills, he has a chance. He might not have the motor too. This guy is not perfect in any way, shape, or form. And the fact of the matter is, in the Kentucky game I watched, he was just flat bad defensively. Offensively, it's fine. And then he got a ball. And then he had the moment I'm talking about. Then there was a loose ball. He picked it up at 55 feet and out dribbled the whole crowd of 4 guys and just rose up off 1 foot and packed it. He's a 1 foot jumper. Woo! 2 feet, 1 foot jumper is very, very important. Hey, David, final question, whoever we pick in the draft even get playing time? What do our available minutes look like? I do think if you drafted Robert Woodard, he could possibly get some playing time. But we don't have a lot, right? You've got your point guards are Donovan and Mike. Your wing players are Jordan, Joe, Jordan, maybe Mia One's ready. Your 4s are Boyan and George Niang, and your centers are Rudy and Tony Bradley. So no, we don't have a lot. But you draft a guy to see if he's better. Final question from Andy. I like the 2 kids from Florida State. I don't see the Patrick Williams love affair is interesting to me, and I don't see it. All right, we're into the madness. We're 18 days away from the start of training camp, and we're into the madness. Russell Westbrook trade possibilities, Chris Paul trade possibilities, markets being created for players with the media. We're into the madness. Have a great one. Thanks for tuning in. Go listen to Locked On NBA on the Locked On NBA mock draft now.